Stop eating. She yanked the Alpha King's fork after sensing Wolfsbane no one else smelled. The air smelled of roasted meats, spiced wine, and something else. Something faint, almost unnoticeable, that carried with it the weight of danger. Courtiers laughed politely, their jeweled gowns and silks swaying in the warm candlelight, but beneath their smiles lingered the ever-present hum of fear. Fear of the Alpha King, fear of his secrets. Fear of the curse that, as rumor whispered, hung over the royal bloodline like a shadow no one dared name aloud. Elijah entered the hall quietly, her steps soft on the polished stones. She was a stranger here, an herbalist brought to the court by a twist of fate and the king's curiosity. Unlike the courtiers, she wore muted colors, the green of forest moss and brown of old bark, and her hands, calloused from tending roots and leaves, were free of rings or jewels. Yet there was something in her presence that drew the eye, something intangible, a kind of stillness that made people notice her even if they did not wish to. Elijah had a gift, rare and strange. She could sense poisons, charms, and other dangers by smell alone. Most people would call it foolish or frightening, and many had, but her instincts had saved lives more than once in her quiet village. Here, in the palace, her skill might very well be the only thing keeping the Alpha King alive. The banquet had begun. Platters of exotic meats and fruits were carried in on silver trays, and the courtiers murmured among themselves, trying to guess which dish would be served next. King Alaric sat at the head of the table, his posture regal, his presence magnetic and frightening at once. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that seemed to pierce straight through anyone who met his gaze. He had a reputation for decisiveness, strength, and a temper as sharp as any sword in his armory. As the first course was brought forward, the courtiers bent to serve the king, bowing low, whispering their flattery. Elijah's senses, trained and precise, caught something others did not. A faint, bitter scent under the aroma of the roasted meat, a poison, subtle but deadly, wolfsbane. Her stomach tightened. She knew that one bite could end the king's life before the next toast. Time slowed. The laughter of the hall seemed distant. Elijah's gaze fixed on the golden fork hovering above the king's plate. Her instincts screamed. "Stop!" she cried, and without thinking twice, she lunged forward, yanking the fork from King Alaric's hand. A hush fell over the hall. The clatter of silver echoed like a warning bell. Courtiers gasped, and some even stumbled in shock. The king's hand froze midair, his piercing gaze locking on Elijah. For a heartbeat, the entire room held its breath, waiting for the fury that surely would come. Alaric's eyes narrowed, not with anger but with a curious spark, a dangerous intrigue. "You dare," he began, his voice low, controlled, yet vibrating with authority. "I smelled it," Elijah said simply, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Wolfsbane. It's on your plate, you can't eat it." A ripple of whispers moved through the hall. Poison at the royal table was unthinkable, a treachery punishable by death. Eyes flicked to each other, suspicion and panic mingling in silence. The king studied her as if weighing every word, every breath. Then slowly he leaned back, the faintest of smiles curling on his lips, not amusement but a spark of something dangerous, something magnetic. "You saw it," he said softly. "You are brave or foolish, perhaps both." Elijah held her ground. Fear was there, yes, but it was tempered by certainty. Her senses had never failed her. "It is deadly," she insisted. "Someone wants to harm you. I couldn't let it happen." Alaric's gaze swept the hall, then returned to her. The courtiers, trembling, dared not speak. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "And no one else noticed this?" "Not a soul," she answered. "Not even the master of the kitchens." "It's subtle, but it's there. Whoever did this, they are skilled and they know the court well." For a moment, Alaric said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he rose from his chair, the long shadows of his figure stretching across the polished floor. The flickering torches cast a flicker of light across his sharp features. "You may have saved me," he said finally, his tone measured. "But in this hall, saving the king can be as dangerous as harming him." Elijah swallowed but did not bow or retreat. Her own strength steadied her. "I will not be afraid to save a life," she said simply. The king's eyes darkened, thoughtful, and something like a flicker of admiration passed over his features. "Very well," he said. "You have courage. That is rare." But the relief was brief. Even as the king's gaze lingered on her with that unsettling mixture of curiosity and caution, the source of the poison remained a mystery. Someone in this hall, trusted by the court, had dared attempt regicide. The idea sent a chill through the assembled nobles. The courtiers whispered among themselves, throwing nervous glances toward the corners of the hall, toward the servants, toward each other. All masks of politeness hid suspicion and fear, but no one dared speak the words aloud. The room felt suddenly smaller, the warm candlelight seeming to darken rather than illuminate. Elijah's mind raced. She did not know the court well, but she knew enough to understand one truth. Whoever had poisoned the king was clever, patient, and bold. And now that she had interfered, she was in their sights too. The banquet resumed, though with a palpable tension threading through the hall. Alaric picked up his glass, eyes lingering on Elijah as if daring her to speak, to act again. A strange, unspoken connection formed between them in that gaze. Danger, defiance, and something else, something neither of them yet named. Later, after the banquet, Alaric summoned Elijah to a private chamber overlooking the palace gardens. The moonlight spilled across the floor, silver and cold, and the scent of night flowers mingled with the crisp night air. Alaric's presence was immense, and Elijah felt both intimidated and drawn to him, sensing the tension between them, a mixture of power and curiosity. "You have a rare gift," Alaric said, pacing the length of the chamber. "Most would have hesitated, perhaps even watched silently. You did not." "I could not," she replied. "If I had, you would be dead." He stopped studying her, and there was a long, silent moment. The tension was almost unbearable, a spark of electricity between them. "And now," he asked softly, "do you trust me?" Elijah's eyes met his. Trust was complicated. He was a king, a ruler of vast lands and surrounded by secrets and power. But she had acted instinctively, without thought for her own safety. And yet, she sensed there was more to Alaric than the alpha king his courtiers feared. Something hidden, something human. "I do not know," she admitted. He smiled faintly, not with warmth, but with something that hinted at danger and desire both. "That is fair," he said. "Trust in my court is fragile, as is life itself." The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the night wind through the open windows. Elijah felt her heart beating faster, awareness sharp. In saving the king, she had stepped into a world of shadows and power, and there would be no turning back. Then a small rustle came from the doorway. A servant, pale and trembling, held a note in hand. Elijah took it carefully. The paper was thin, edged in black. In delicate, almost calligraphic script it read, "Trust no one, not even him." Elijah's eyes darted to Alaric. The torchlight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze. He looked unreadable, yet in that moment, the hall of shadows seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the two of them and the danger pressing close. The night was no longer safe. The king's life was only the beginning, and Elijah's role in this story was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, the hand that had tried to poison him waited, and she could feel the tension of unseen eyes, watching, planning, and ready to strike again. Elijah's breath caught, and a strange thrill ran through her. Fear and courage intertwined, a delicate balance she had never felt so sharply before. The king, Alaric, stood before her, not as a distant ruler, but as a man alive with secrets, power, and danger. And somehow, she was now bound to him in ways neither of them could yet understand. And in the shadows beyond the moonlit garden, something stirred. The whisper of a curse, the shadow of betrayal, and the scent of Wolfsbane hung in the air. reminding Elijah that in this palace, nothing was ever truly safe. The hunt had begun. The palace was quieter now, yet the weight of what had happened at the banquet lingered like a stubborn shadow. Elijah walked slowly through the echoing halls, the note trembling slightly in her hand. Trust no one, not even him. The words burned in her mind. She knew danger had not vanished with the king's saved life. It had only shifted, hiding behind the silks, the whispers, and the carved stone walls of the palace. King Alaric waited in his private chamber, a room lit by pale moonlight that poured through tall arched windows. Heavy curtains swayed in the night breeze, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine mingled with the faint metallic tang of torches still burning in the hall. Elijah entered cautiously, her footsteps quiet, but Alaric's eyes were already upon her, sharp and calculating, yet carrying a flicker of something else, curiosity, perhaps even admiration. "You came," he said, his voice calm, controlled, but low enough to vibrate through the room. "I did," Elijah replied, keeping her tone steady. She placed the note carefully on the edge of a carved oak table. "Someone wanted you dead tonight, someone very skilled." Alaric moved to the window, resting a hand on the sill. His silhouette, framed by moonlight, was both commanding and lonely. "Yes," he said slowly, "and they may strike again. That is why I wanted to speak with you. You acted without hesitation tonight, and that is rare, dangerous, but rare." Elijah held her ground. "I did what I had to do. I could not allow you to die." Her eyes met his, steady despite the pounding of her heart. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled her in even as fear whispered at the edges of her mind. Alaric's gaze softened just slightly, and he gestured to a chair across from him. "Sit. We must discuss this. I need to know, how did you sense it? The poison." Elijah hesitated. Her gift was delicate, personal, and revealing it too fully could make her vulnerable. "I smell what others cannot," she said carefully. "It is not a skill most understand, and it is not always safe to use it here." Alaric leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Not safe, I understand, yet you trusted it enough to act. That is intriguing." His eyes lingered on her face, searching. "You could have been wrong. You could have been killed by the very hand that prepared the poison. Why risk it?" Elijah's gaze did not falter. "Because a life is more valuable than fear." Her words hung in the air, simple yet firm, and Alaric found himself studying her with an intensity he had never felt before. There was a silence then, the kind that carries more weight than words. The palace outside seemed to hold its breath. The moonlight caught the angles of Alaric's face, highlighting the sharpness of his jaw, the darkness of his eyes, and the hidden pain beneath his calm exterior. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer, almost a whisper. "You are unlike anyone I have met, Elijah. Bold, stubborn, fearless in ways I cannot easily understand." Elijah felt a strange warmth at his words, but she did not relax. There was danger here, always danger, and the note's warning pulsed through her mind. Not even him. "I need to understand," Alaric continued, his tone returning to its usual authority, "who you can trust, and whether I can trust you." Elijah looked down at the note, then back at him. "Trust is not simple in a court full of secrets. I will do what I must, but I cannot promise blind loyalty." He smiled faintly, a slow curve of his lips that hinted at amusement and approval. "Very well, that honesty is rare and valuable." The tension between them was palpable, a delicate thread pulling them closer even as it reminded them both of danger. They were allies now, forced into a strange partnership, but each carried a wariness born of survival. Alaric moved to a side table, pulling down a large, ancient book bound in leather. Dust rose in tiny clouds, catching the moonlight. "This," he said, flipping the pages carefully, "is the history of my bloodline. What you sense tonight is not merely poison. It is part of a curse." Elijah leaned closer, curiosity piqued despite the caution she felt. "A curse?" she whispered. "Yes," Alaric replied. "Generations of kings and queens have been marked by it." It feeds on ambition, betrayal, on the hearts of those who desire power too much. His eyes met hers, dark and serious. It twists loyalty, blinds judgment, and can destroy even the strongest ruler. Tonight, the Wolfsbane was only a symptom. Elijah's fingers tightened around the edge of her cloak. Then whoever tried to poison you, they know the curse. They are clever and patient. They understand it. Alaric nodded slowly. Exactly. And that makes them more dangerous than I had realized. He closed the book, and the weight of the moment pressed down on them both. We must find them. We must uncover the source of this threat before it strikes again. The air between them was thick, a mixture of urgency, fear, and something unspoken that neither dared name. As they spoke, the palace outside continued its quiet vigilance. Shadows moved across the hallways, servants whispered cautiously, and the moon cast silver light on the stone walls, illuminating the fine dust in the air. "Why me?" Elijah asked finally, breaking the silence. "Why involve me? I am no knight, no soldier, only an herbalist." Alaric's gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability shining through his normally imperious demeanor. "Because you see what others cannot," he said simply. "And tonight you saved my life. That is a debt I cannot ignore. But," his eyes darkened again, "this is not a gift. It is dangerous. Being close to me may place you in more peril than you can imagine." Elijah's heart quickened. Danger had never frightened her before like this, not quite. But there was something in Alaric's presence, commanding, magnetic, that both terrified and enthralled her. "We must be careful," he said, pacing slowly across the room. "The court is full of shadows. Friends can be foes, and betrayal can come from the most unexpected places." Elijah nodded. "I understand. I will not act recklessly. But I cannot stand by and do nothing if another attempt is made." Alaric stopped, turning to face her fully. "Good," he said, his voice low. "That courage is rare and necessary, but know this, trusting the wrong person could cost more than life. It could cost everything." For a long moment, they stood in silence, two figures alone in a room that smelled of moonlight and jasmine, both aware of the unspoken tension between them. It was not just danger that pulled them together. It was curiosity, respect, and something more complicated, an unnameable attraction, electric and undeniable. Then, from the shadows beyond the door, a soft rustle caught Elijah's attention. She turned slightly, senses alert. A figure, a servant, pale and trembling, slipped a folded note into her hands without speaking. She opened it carefully. The words, written in delicate script, made her pulse quicken. The poison was only the beginning. Trust no one in this court, not even him. Her eyes flicked to Alaric. The king's expression was calm, controlled, but she sensed the flicker of something deeper in his gaze. He did not reach for the note. He merely observed, silent and unreadable. The weight of the warning pressed on her. The court was filled with shadows, schemes, and secrets. Elijah knew now that saving the king had placed her in the center of a dangerous game. And yet, despite the fear, a strange thrill ran through her, a mixture of dread and fascination. Alaric moved closer, his presence commanding the space around them. "You are aware," he said softly, "that standing in the center of such shadows is dangerous, that your choices may determine not only my life but yours as well." Elijah nodded, her fingers tightening around the note. "I know, but I cannot ignore what I have seen. I cannot ignore the danger when it is so close." He studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. "Very well. You will remain by my side then. But remember this, in the court appearances are everything and loyalty is often a mask." Elijah met his gaze steadily. "Then I will learn to see the truth beneath the masks." A quiet understanding passed between them, unspoken yet profound. Danger, intrigue, and an unexpected bond were now entwined around them both, and neither could escape it. Outside, the moon cast silver light over the palace gardens. Shadows twisted between the trees, the soft rustle of leaves like whispered secrets. Elijah felt the weight of the night pressing against her. a reminder that the world she had entered was far more treacherous than anything she had imagined. And yet, despite the fear, despite the unknown, she could not help but glance at Alaric, the Alpha King who carried power, danger, and a hint of vulnerability in equal measure. Something told her that the path ahead would demand courage, cunning, and perhaps even trust. But the note's warning lingered in her mind. Not even him. Somewhere in the shadows, the true threat waited, patient and silent, ready to strike again. And Elijah knew that the next move would be the most dangerous yet. The game of shadows had begun in earnest, and the court, with all its intrigue, power, and hidden magic, would not forgive mistakes. Elijah's pulse raced, the thrill of fear and determination mingling. The Alpha King stood before her, and together they would face the dangers hiding in the dark corners of the palace. But one question remained, echoing like a distant whisper through the halls. Who could they truly trust? The answer, she suspected, would not come easily. Even in the quiet hours before dawn, shadows moved through the stone corridors like living things. Torches burned low, their flames whispering secrets against the walls. Elijah walked beside King Alaric through a narrow passage that few in the court even knew existed. The air was cold here, heavy with age and forgotten history. Neither of them spoke. The warning notes echoed in Elijah's mind. Trust no one, not even him. She wanted to believe Alaric was different, yet belief was dangerous in a court built on deception. Alaric stopped before a hidden door carved into the stone. Ancient symbols were etched across its surface, worn smooth by time. He pressed his palm against the center. The door groaned open, releasing a breath of cold air that smelled of dust, iron, and old magic. This place, he said quietly, was sealed generations ago. Elijah stepped inside, her senses sharp. The scent here was unlike anything she had known. Old sorrow, old power. Something wounded yet alive. The chamber beyond was vast and circular, lit by pale crystals embedded in the walls. At its center stood a stone altar, cracked but unbroken. Chains lay scattered across the floor, rusted with time. Above the altar, carved into the ceiling, was the image of a wolf crowned in fire. Elijah's breath caught. This is where the curse began. Alaric nodded slowly. Yes. He walked toward the altar, his steps heavy. My ancestors believed strength meant control. They bound power they did not understand. They fed it fear, and in return it fed on them. Elijah approached the altar carefully. Her fingers brushed its surface, and a sharp chill ran through her arm. Visions flickered at the edge of her mind, kings crowned in blood, queens whispering betrayals, brothers turning on brothers. The curse is alive, she said softly. Not in body, but in memory. It remembers every act of betrayal. Alaric's jaw tightened. That is why the poison was chosen. Wolfsbane weakens the bond between ruler and beast. Whoever planned this wanted me vulnerable. And desperate, Elijah added. They stood in silence, the weight of history pressing down on them. Why show me this? Elijah asked. Alaric turned to her, his expression stripped of command. Because I cannot face it alone, and because the curse reacts to you, it recognizes your gift. Elijah's heart pounded. My gift was never meant for this. Perhaps not, he said, but fate rarely asks permission. A sudden sound echoed through the chamber, a soft clap. Well said, my king. Both of them turned sharply. A figure stepped out from the shadows near the far wall. Tall, cloaked, face half hidden by a silver mask. The voice was familiar. Lord Kalen, Alaric said slowly. My uncle. Elijah felt a chill run through her. The scent of danger surged. Wolfsbane lingered faintly in the air around him. You should not be here, Alaric continued. Kalen chuckled. On the contrary, this place belongs to my blood as much as yours. Elijah stepped slightly in front of Alaric without thinking. Her instincts screamed. Kalen's masked gaze fixed on her. Ah, the little seer, the one who ruined everything. Alaric's voice hardened. You poisoned my food. Yes, Kalen said calmly, and I would do it again. The crown was never meant for you. The curse destroys everyone who seeks it, Alaric said. You know that. Kaelin's laughter echoed coldly. It destroys the weak. I intend to command it. Elijah shook her head. You cannot control what feeds on betrayal. Kaelin stepped closer. You misunderstand, girl. Betrayal is my strength. With a sharp motion, he raised his hand. The crystals in the walls flared violently. The ground trembled. Chains on the floor began to move. The curse had awakened. Dark energy surged toward the altar, swirling like smoke. Elijah felt it claw at her senses, trying to overwhelm her. She staggered, but Alaric caught her arm, steadying her. Stay with me, he said urgently. Elijah closed her eyes and focused on scent, on truth. Beneath the chaos, she found the core of the curse: pain, loneliness, rage born from abandonment. It is bound by grief, she whispered. Not hatred, Kaelin snarled. Silence, the chains lashed out, wrapping around the altar. The wolf carving above cracked, fragments falling like tears of stone. The ritual must begin now, Alaric said, or it will consume everything. Elijah looked at him, fear and determination colliding. If we do this, there is no turning back. I know. They moved together, standing before the altar. Alaric placed his hand on the stone. Elijah placed hers beside his. The chamber pulsed. Elijah spoke softly, words not learned but remembered. She spoke of release, of forgiveness, of strength without domination. The curse resisted, roaring in silence. Kaelin lunged forward. No, the energy surged wildly. A blast of force threw Elijah backward. She hit the stone floor hard, breath knocked from her lungs. Elijah, Alaric shouted. Kaelin seized the moment, drawing a hidden blade. He moved fast, desperate. Alaric stepped between him and Elijah. Steel flashed. Alaric cried out as the blade struck his side. Time slowed. Elijah screamed his name, scrambling toward him. Blood stained his tunic, dark against the stone. Kaelin backed away, breathing hard. It had to be done, he said. The crown demands sacrifice. The curse howled, unstable, furious. Elijah knelt beside Alaric, pressing her hands to his wound. Her gift surged beyond control. She smelled fear, pain, regret, and something else. Love not spoken, not claimed. But real. You cannot leave, she whispered. Not like this. Alaric smiled weakly. You were right about the cost. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not stop. She focused on the scent of life, pulling it back, refusing to let it fade. The curse reacted violently. Chains shattered. Light and darkness collided. Kaelin screamed as the force turned on him, dragging him toward the altar. No, he cried. I am the rightful. The curse wrapped around him, silencing his words. With a final surge, the energy collapsed inward. Silence fell. The chamber stood broken, cracked, but still. Kaelin was gone. The altar lay in ruins. Elijah collapsed beside Alaric, exhausted, trembling. He still breathed, but barely. Footsteps echoed from above. Guards shouted in the distance. Elijah cradled Alaric's head, tears falling freely now. Stay, she begged. Please. Alaric's eyes fluttered open. You broke it, he whispered. The curse feels quieter. But not gone, she said. No, he agreed faintly. And neither is the danger. His hand tightened weakly around hers. That was when Elijah felt it. A new scent, not poison, not betrayal, but something ancient shifting. Outside, a long howl echoed through the palace walls, deep, powerful, and unanswered. Elijah looked up, fear tightening her chest. The curse was wounded, not destroyed, and it was changing. Dawn came slowly over the palace, as if the sun itself hesitated to witness what had been broken during the night. The great halls, once full of whispers and schemes, were silent now. Guards stood watch with tired eyes. Servants moved carefully, speaking only in murmurs. News had spread quickly. The king had been wounded, a traitor revealed, and ancient magic awakened beneath the crown. Elijah had not left Alaric's side. He lay in his private chamber, pale but breathing, wrapped in clean linens. The wound at his side had been treated by healers, yet they did not understand how he still lived. They whispered of strength, of luck, of fate. Elijah knew the truth was deeper. She sat beside his bed, exhaustion weighing heavily on her body. Her hands still trembled faintly from the ritual, from the force she had felt tearing through the chamber. The curse was quieter now, but not gone. It lingered like a wounded shadow. Alaric stirred. Elijah leaned forward instantly. "You're awake." His eyes opened slowly, dark and tired, yet clearer than before. When he saw her, a faint, honest smile touched his lips. "You stayed." "Of course," she said softly. "I wasn't leaving." He tried to sit up, then stopped with a sharp breath. She gently pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Don't," he obeyed, studying her face. "The curse, it feels different." "Yes," Elijah said. "It's weakened, but it's watching, waiting." Alaric exhaled slowly. "Then it is like the crown itself." They shared a quiet moment, the weight of everything unspoken resting between them. Outside the window, the palace gardens glowed with early light, dew clinging to leaves like silver tears. Later that morning, the council gathered. The nobles stood in a wide circle, their confidence shaken. No one argued when Alaric entered, supported by Elijah. His steps were slower, but his presence remained powerful. Yet something had changed. He no longer ruled by fear alone. "The traitor is gone," Alaric said, his voice calm but steady. "But the curse remains. It was fed by our choices, and it will end only when we change those choices." Murmurs rippled through the hall. "One ruler cannot carry this alone," he continued. "The crown has demanded control for generations. That ends now." Elijah felt every eye turn toward her. Alaric reached for her hand openly. Gasps followed. "This woman saved my life," he said. "She faced the curse without armor or title. She reminded me that strength without mercy is weakness." A noble stepped forward. "You would trust an outsider with the fate of the kingdom." Alaric's gaze sharpened. "I would trust truth over tradition." Silence followed. That night, Elijah returned to the chamber beneath the palace alone. She stood before the broken altar, the air heavy but calm. The wolf carving above was cracked, its fierce expression softened by time and damage. The curse lingered like a low hum beneath her skin. "I know you're still here," she whispered. The air stirred. A presence answered, not with rage but with sorrow. "You were bound by fear," she said gently, "but fear does not have to rule." She placed her palm against the stone. Memories flowed, not violent visions but quieter ones. Lonely kings, queens who loved too deeply. Power used to hide pain. Elijah spoke words of release, not command. She did not try to control the curse. She acknowledged it. For the first time in centuries, it listened. The presence retreated, not destroyed, but changed. No longer a chain, no longer a weapon, a choice. When Elijah returned to the surface, the air felt lighter. Days passed. Alaric healed slowly. The court adjusted to a new rhythm. Decisions were shared. Justice became careful, not cruel. Fear lost its grip. One evening, Alaric stood on the palace balcony, watching the forest beyond the walls. The wolves had been silent since the night of the ritual. Elijah joined him. "You should rest," she said. "So should you," he replied. They stood side by side, comfortable in the quiet. "I was raised to believe a king must stand alone," Alaric said. "That love was a weakness." Elijah looked at him. "And now I know better." He turned to her fully. "The curse did not choose blood, it chose intention. It reacted when I stopped trying to control it." She nodded. "Power that listens becomes something else." "Hope," he said softly. Their eyes met. The air between them was charged, not with danger now, but with truth. "I don't know what place I have here," Elijah admitted. "I never wanted a crown or a court." Alaric smiled gently. "Then don't take either, stay because you choose to." She considered his words, the weight of choice settling in her heart. That night the wolves howled again, but not in warning, in harmony. The sound rolled through the valley, strong and clear, echoing against the mountains. The people listened from their windows, not in fear but in awe. Elijah felt it then. The curse was no longer a threat. It had become a guardian. Seasons turned. The kingdom changed. Alaric ruled with patience. Elijah walked freely between palace and forest, between crown and soil. She remained an herbalist, a seer, and something more, a bridge. They did not rush what grew between them. There was no need. Some bonds were not forged in fire, but in survival. One morning, as the first snow dusted the palace towers, Alaric stood before the council once more. "The crown does not command the land," he said. "It serves it." Elijah watched from the edge of the hall, pride and quiet joy warming her chest. Later they walked beyond the palace walls together into the forest where the curse had first been born. Alaric removed the circlet from his head and placed it on a stone. "For now," he said. Elijah looked at him. "Are you afraid?" "No," he answered honestly. "Not anymore." They stood hand in hand beneath the trees, the wind moving gently through the branches. The world was still dangerous, but it was also healing. And for the first time in generations, the crown no longer ruled through shadow, but through choice.